Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Meg Alexander, and I am very excited, as always, to get to host today's event. Today's conversation is going to be with Arielle Kestenbaum about how to incorporate nutrition into our self-care routines. Now, before we get started, I do just want to go through some really quick, simple housekeeping rules so that we can make sure that this is a safe and comfortable space for everyone. Now, first of all, we absolutely encourage all of you to participate. You are welcome to turn your cameras on if you'd like to share your smiling, maskless faces with us safely. But no need to be Instagram perfect, y'all. Truly, messy buns, furry coworkers. Don't care if you are joining us from your corner office or your living room couch. We just want to meet you where you are. Now, if you'd like to participate in other ways that don't require your camera, that is totally great too. You are always encouraged to head on over to our chat feature. I'd love to see where everyone is joining us from, so please feel free to tell us where you're located. I am coming to you from Toledo, Ohio. This is land that belonged to the Fox, Kickapoo, and Potawatomi tribes in my area. So if you would like to share, please feel free to let us know where you're joining us from, and if you know whose land you might be on today. All right, now this conversation is being recorded. So what that means for all of you is that about 2 to 4 business days after today's chat, you're going to get a rewatch email from Power to Fly with a link to this recording when we post it on our website. Now, the recording will show up on our YouTube channel a little bit later today. And just know that if you have any issues showing up on the recording, just make sure that you don't come off mute and you will not show up on the recording today. Now, please feel free to share any questions you have in the chat box. I would love to make sure that we get all of your questions answered today. If you have a question that you'd like me to ask, but you want to remain anonymous, no worries. Just DM your question to me, Meg Alexander. I will always be happy to ask any questions you'd like on your behalf. I see we've got people starting to join us in the chat. We've got Collingswood, New Jersey, Philly, Wisco, Cincinnati. What's up? Hooday. Chicago, Argentina, California. Loving this. Love seeing all the love here. Thanks so much, y'all. All right. Now, if you have any further questions, please feel free to ask. I'm always happy to let y'all know how you can participate and enjoy these experiences even more. Now, like I mentioned before, we have a very, very special guest with us today. I'm really excited to introduce you to Arielle Kestenbaum. Now, Arielle is the founder and executive director of Fair Meals, Inc., fairmeals.org, which is a registered 501c3 nonprofit org offering families free educational programming focused on healthy, simple, and affordable meal solutions. Now, Arielle is a registered dietitian with a master's degree in nutrition and dietetics from New York University. And Fair Meals has partnerships in the New York City area with Smart University and Brooklyn Community Services. Arielle, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Yes,
is
me
there
too.
anything else that you want our audience to know about you before we dive into questions today?
No, I think my bio pretty much covers everything. I think, Fair Meals, we started actually on the onset of the pandemic, when I think just feeding our family seemed like such a major task and something pretty daunting. And I don't know if people remember this. And, I'm here from New York City. I didn't share that in the chat, but supermarkets were pretty crazy back then. And going into a food store was pretty crazy back then. And just the idea of stocking your home it was not as easy as it is now or as it was before. And I'm not even talking about, budget wise or financially, but just the mere standing in line for hours and just the lack of supply because people were, hoarding because we were sheltering in place and everything of that sort. So it definitely was a little bit more difficult. So I really just kind of put together a resource very quickly, which was this online platform to help families feel a little bit better about the foods and the meals that they can create for their families. And then I pivoted a lot, as kind of things have eased and we've kind of shifted out of that hardcore COVID era, thankfully. We've definitely shifted a bit, but where we haven't shifted is we really just still focus on health, ease, and affordability as it comes to nutrition and meal solutions. So I'm really excited to be here today. And thank you everyone for joining.
So happy to have you here. All right, so let's dive in here about, maybe the premise of our talk for today. Could you explain to us a little bit about why you feel nutrition is a form of self-care? And what are some of the main benefits that we can see from following a healthy diet?
Sure. So, nutrition is probably a form of self care for many reasons, but I'm going to focus really on two reasons. So, I think first off, and this may be biased or not, but I think just nourishing our body with nutrient dense foods um, is is the ultimate self care, right? When we talk about self care, we talk about things. There's different aspects to that, right? So there's mental health, just making ourselves feel better. Mentally, physically, and things of that sort, and actually nourishing our bodies with the proper nutrients to help, to help organ functions, to help growth and development and health, and just general health. Um, that's just the best way that we can nourish our body. And when I think of self care, I think about the idea of nourishing our body. So I really can't think of anything more um, that is more appropriate for self-care than properly following a healthy diet, or a healthy lifestyle rather, which is what I like to say. I don't even really like to use the word diet. I like to just use the word healthy lifestyle. I think also just the cooking process, and this may not be for everybody, but the actual cooking process of you know getting yourself in the kitchen and putting together a meal, that can be something that's very, very calming for people. It can kind of take people out of their, the rush of life, and it just can be enjoyable for people, right? Some people like to put a TV show on while they're cooking, or they like to put music on and they like to let loose a little bit. And all of that, or they just really enjoy preparing meals for themselves or for their families or for friends, and hosting big meals. There are many people that this can be very, very enjoyable for. And that's all, that all falls under self care, right? Just making things enjoyable for ourselves definitely falls under that category, that or that umbrella of self care. So I think those are like the two things that I really um, feel fall under, self care. And then, in terms of what are the main benefits of following a healthy diet, again, like I said before, it's really just to make ourselves feel better, but also to help our bodies, with growth and development and just general health. And that's really all the best that we can do. So I would say that probably is my those are the two things that I would answer for that question.
I love that. I am definitely not of the cooking is zen for me. I tend to approach it more as, does this fuel my body? Does it taste good? Excellent, great, done, moving on. So if you are one of those people who cooking is your zen thing, incredible jealousy right now. Absolutely, that's wonderful. But yeah, like I think you're right. This is definitely something that personally I would not have thought of as a form of self-care, but it makes,
Mhm.
you make a very good argument for it, that you are, if self-care is trying to be nice to the engine that, runs your body,
Mhm.
then yeah, you do want to try and fuel it the best you can. All right, let's talk about unbalanced diets. Now, what do you think is the relationship there? Do you think that an unbalanced nutrition in someone's daily life can cause them stress? Do you think it exacerbates it? What do you think is the relationship there?
So in short, yes, it definitely can, and there's actually a whole biochemistry reason behind that as well. Instead of just saying yes, it can, eating processed foods or eating, a diet that's generally unbalanced, will just, kind of set things off in the gut microbiome. That's all true, but there's real science behind that in terms of our cortisol levels. Our cortisol levels are it's a hormone that's related to stress. It's very, very much affiliated with stress. Um, and so when we eat, there are certain foods that increase cortisol levels, and we don't want that increase in cortisol levels. There are other factors such as sleep, physical activity, things of that sort that increase those cortisol levels, but food also has a very direct relationship with that. So certain foods, and really specifically processed foods, if we have a diet, I'm not saying once in a while having processed foods or even once a day having a bag of chips. But I'm saying if our diet's very, very heavily focused on processed foods, that's going to increase our cortisol levels, and that will ultimately increase our stress. Um, and then there are a lot of foods um, that are, fall under more of the category of healthy, which is another word I really don't like to use, but foods that are a little bit more balanced or nutrient dense. That's kind of the word or the term that we like to use at Fair Meals. And those foods include things like avocado, banana, leafy greens, dark chocolate. And when I mean dark chocolate, I don't mean not milk chocolate and it's Hershey's dark chocolate. I mean real, made out of, cacao, that type of dark chocolate that some people really, really don't like. But some people do. Many people do. Seeds, those are all foods that can lower our cortisol levels, and ultimately they can help lower stress. So there really is a relationship. There's a real biochemistry relationship between, following a balanced diet or not following a balanced diet and our cortisol levels. So absolutely.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. Margaret's in the chat here saying what you eat is fundamental. It's a basic building block of self-care. And that does really make me think in terms of like, if I'm stressed and mental health is important to me, it's something I have to pay attention to. But if I'm stressed, the first thing I want is sugar. That's the processed, the terrible, where it's like that stopped being sugar like 8 processes ago. But that's the kind of stuff that you crave, or at least that I do.
Yeah.
Do you find that like impedes this?
So I'm glad you brought that up, because I did actually have like a whole webinar and a whole presentation on this. And I spoke about the difference between acute stress and chronic stress. And I think that when we talk about the different types of stress that we go through in our life, throughout our lives, it's important to know, what kind of falls into what. So acute stress is something that's a very, very stressful situation right at the moment, right? It's pretty acute, means kind of like short-lived. So, somebody goes through, a really, really stressful day at work, or really, really stressful day with, a partner, or, something that causes stress for like a day or a few days, right? Something very, very short term and short lived. I'm going to tell you to go for that tub of ice cream if that's going to make you happy. I'm not going to say, eating seeds is going to, our cortisol levels will probably be raised regardless. And I'm not going to say, well, you have to eat seeds because, you just broke up with your partner, or you just had a really, really stressful day at work, or, something terrible happened and, a loved one is sick, something like that. I'm going to tell you, go for what's going to make you happy. And for a lot of people, it's those, it's the ice cream, it's the cakes, it's the cookies. And that's definitely really important. And we have to listen to our bodies. And I'm a very big believer in listening to our bodies and being able to indulge, every so often. But chronic stress, which is a type of stress that kind of lasts a long time, like someone feeling really just unfulfilled day in and day out in their job, and it just causes so much stress. Some people are really very good at being able to compartmentalize between their jobs, and then they don't take that home. But a lot of people do, and some people are in, I don't like to use this word, but they're in jobs that are very, very toxic for their mental health. And they bring it home, and it, kind of gets into their interpersonal relationships with their families and their friends, and it just really causes them to be so unhappy. Or people have certain financial, everyone has financial stress, I think, to a certain degree, but some people have to the point that they it's so overtaking them. And these types of stresses that are something that they're just kind of living with day in and day out, I think those are, that's the type of stress that we have to maybe rethink of, being like, okay, well, every single day you can't come home and start eating, a bag of chips because you're just so miserable with your job. And maybe it's like, maybe let's try to kind of figure out how can we take some of that stress out of our lives, instead of just focusing, instead of being like, well, I had another really stressful day, I'm just going to eat another tub of ice cream. I think that's kind of the difference there. So does that answer your question a little bit, or make it, I think, clarify that?
No, I think it does. Because you're right, we want to be making these better choices, but you're also right, you do have to be able to listen to your body and understand that some days that cookie's not going to kill you. You know what? It's fine. It's that
100%.
Maybe you're like me, maybe you bite the heads off gummy bears and that is your thing, right? That's my thing. That's my stress reliever. They scream, oh, so sad, and then I get a treat, right? It's sad, it's weird, but it's what we do. Okay, so let's think a little bit more long term. A lot of people, myself included, honestly, have a lot of trouble planning for the week ahead, right? You hear people talking about meal planning and meal prepping. Every person that I know that's ever done it seemingly does it with like eating the same thing for 2 meals a day for 5 days, which I know wouldn't work for me. But if you are brand new to meal prep or to meal planning for the week, what do you think is the best way to get started to make sure that you are planning to have like actual nutrition in your diet and you're not just thinking in terms of like, oh yeah, chips are good and also maybe an apple, I don't know. So let's talk about this. Where should people start?
So I love this question because I talk about this all the time, and people always, after I kind of give this answer back to her, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. That makes me feel better. Meal planning or meal prepping can look 100 different ways for 100 different people. For every single person, meal prepping can look different. So for one person, it can be cooking every single meal for the entire week and putting it in the fridge and the freezer, wherever, it's appropriate for that to go. For others, it can be cooking meals for half of the week. For some, it can be, just making dinners and refrigerating and freezing them. For some, it's just preparing snacks for the week. And for others, it's as simple as cutting up, our produce, fruits and vegetables, and just having them in the refrigerator, easy access, easy to plop on, if we want to roast them or we want to put them in a bag or, a container to bring them for a snack. And all of these work and all of these are considered to be meal prep and meal planning. And you have to do what works for you. I'll tell you, for me, I need my dinners as fresh as possible. So I am, feeding my kids and bathing them. And once that's done, I'm starting to prep dinner. But what I do is on Mondays, I spend time prepping fruits and vegetables that I know I'm going to be using during the week. And I cut those up, and that makes things much, much easier. Another really, really great option is just, planning out some sort of menu, and it can be a very tentative type of menu. It can be very preliminary. It can be very, some sort of rough draft, and just making sure we have most or all of those groceries at home in the beginning of the week, or even just doing 2 sets of grocery shopping, right? Saying like, okay, Sunday I'm going to do for the first half of the week, and then Wednesday I'm going to do for the second half of the week. And just making sure we have those ingredients at home so that we're able to just, be like, oh, I have to make dinner, but I don't have, the broccoli here. So I'm going to run out and let me go buy broccoli. So that's meal prep doesn't have to be as rigid as it sounds. It can really look so many different ways for so many different people. I think that's an important point to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm loving the chiming in here from other people talking about, the different things that they do like to do. Because you're
I'm
right,
curious to hear.
yeah, it doesn't have to be just one thing, right? My husband is a type 1 diabetic. When he meal preps for the week, I know that we are going to have a starch and a protein, and anything else is kind of up to me. So if I want, pasta on breadsticks on pasta, then I make those things and I add them to whatever he's prepped for the week. But I think,
Exactly.
it is good. Chariska is in here asking, what are some easy go-tos that are okay to have every week? I need something that's repeatable and easy. Okay, so let's talk about it. Like, what are some of, let's say snack wise, what are some of the go-to snacks that you keep around your house?
So things and again, everyone's going to be really different, but for me, I'm always telling people a great go-to snack is like a cheese stick with a piece of fruit or with vegetables. So I always have cheese sticks at home. It's a really, really great snack. I know some people are like, well, that's for kids. It's not. It's such a great protein. It's great to pair with a fruit and a vegetable because it helps, keep us fuller for a little bit longer because we do get that protein. I also really like to have nuts at home or nut butter. I like to have things like hummus or make my own hummus. I have a very, very easy recipe that I believe is on our website. Guacamole is a little bit harder just because it turns brown. And to me, that's when I can't touch it anymore. But, any sort of dip that you can make that seems really interesting to you, or even just buying a dip that seems interesting to you. Those are just easy things to have at home that we can just throw together with a fruit or a vegetable and or some crackers and just have a really good balanced snack.
Dear Lord, every time, y'all, I host how many chats of these a week and I still lose my mute button at least once in a bed. Thank you for your patience. Sorry.
Totally fine.
Jason's chiming in saying that the veggie tray is their new go-to snack. I am also a huge fan of the grazing station in the middle of my kitchen table. So it's all fresh fruit. Like we have a Costco membership and 2 people in this house because I go and buy fresh fruit from them. So yeah, that's my big thing, table full of, I'll have like the grapes and the clementines and all that kind of stuff out and just like ready to grab. All right, so let's see who else here. Bethany's saying that it's been plant-based Taco Tuesday in their house every Tuesday for years. So I love that idea of kind of creating a little bit of a routine for yourself, something to kind of ground you. Yeah, I like that.
I love that too.
Let's talk about let's go to super basics here. This person wants to know when we're talking about an overall nutritious diet, what are we looking at? Are there guidelines that people should know about? Let's say like if you never thought beyond health and nutrition when we were taught it went like 3rd grade with like the food pyramid, that's not a thing anymore. So like if people are curious, what should they be consulting when they're trying to form a diet that is nutritious?
That's a great question. So yes, the USDA puts out guidelines. I think that's definitely not the place to start. I would not tell you go onto the website and start looking at the guidelines because that's very, very daunting. And something that we like in the nutrition world, we like to talk about are SMART goals. And I honestly forgot what all of the letters kind of stand for, but we do want to make sure they're attainable, realistic. Those are the last 3. And will allow us to make changes that we'll be able to actually keep, right? We want this to become a lifestyle. This is not a diet. It's a lifestyle that we want. And so I think the first things that I really usually tell people to do are either if they want to make their own changes, they can kind of tell me what are those changes they want to make, or they can tell themselves, well, we're going to make some of these changes. But I kind of just tell people to start with the macronutrients, which are the proteins, the fats, and the carbohydrates. So our proteins, we want to make sure we're focusing on lean proteins. So lean proteins would be such things like poultry, mostly like white meat poultry is probably going to be your leanest option. Plant-based proteins are great, fish and seafood. And then there are a lot of, leaner cuts of meat as well, and leaner ground beefs and things of that sort. And those are the proteins that we should be focusing on. Fats, we want to focus on healthy fat. Fat has gotten this negative reputation, but actually we need fat in our diet. We need healthy fats in our diet because that's what's going to help increase our HDL, which is our good cholesterol. And we want that to be increased. And people that cut fat completely out of their diet, their HDLs are very, very low. And when they go get their blood work, they're usually so excited because they're like, oh, great, my blood's going to be great. But then their HDL, which is that good cholesterol, comes back low. And their doctors are like, well, what fat do you eat? And that's things like even having eggs can help raise our HDL, avocado, using avocado oil, olive oil, fish is going to be a very healthy fat as well. And if those are foods that you're not eating plenty, enough of, you find that they're just not part of your diet because they're things you don't like, then, speaking to your doctor about an omega-3 fatty acid supplement is also going to be great. But we need to make sure that we have healthy fats in our diet. And then the last one's carbohydrates. So there's simple carbohydrates versus complex carbohydrates. So we want to focus on complex carbohydrates. Complex carbohydrates are not things like cookies, cakes, white bread, things like that. They're whole wheat, whole grain breads, whole wheat pasta, brown rice, fruit. A fruit is a complex carbohydrate. Starchy vegetables, like sweet potatoes, squash rather, and things of that sort. So that's what we want to really focus on. And I tell people, when they're kind of starting, let's start with the macronutrients. So we can always get to the nitty gritty a little bit later, but those are really, really easy things that we can focus on.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we have this idea of, kind of benchline where we want our nutrition to be. And we've talked a little bit about, prepping for snacks and stuff. When we're talking about prepping snacks for really long days, do you recommend like snacking in tiers? Like how do you recommend this? I know how I pack for a road trip, which is probably not how we want people snacking throughout the day. So what are some guidelines that we should know about?
So there's kind of these guidelines that people say in terms of, having 3 meals and 2 to 3 snacks a day. So if that works for you, that's great. And prepping your snacks can be very, very helpful. And I actually think most people, when they prep their snacks, the meals don't seem as daunting to them, right? They're almost able to kind of fill in with the meals, but it's the snacks that can be really difficult because it's so easy to run in and get a bag of chips, and it's so easy to go in and get candy and kind of snack on that. And again, if that's something you want once in a while, that's great. But preparing snacks ahead of time can be very helpful. Like I said before, nuts, nut butter with fruit, vegetables with it, some sort of dip, the cheese sticks, as I mentioned before, some crackers with cheese. These are all really great snacks, and just having them ready or having them, making sure we have them at home. That's my advice for that. There are other people that say we have 6 small meals a day, and 6 small meals a day are essentially eating 6 snacks a day. We're not saying to eat 6 breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So doubling up on each. We're actually recommending to people to eat 6 nice size snacks a day. And if that works for you, then that's great too. Some people don't like to have big meals, and they just thrive off of having, these 6 smaller snacks, these, 6 smaller meals rather, and these, nice size snacks. So yeah, so that, that can work for people too. And a lot of people I know or who I've worked with in the past have definitely shifted towards this type of, to this type of thing. And they find it very, very helpful in making sure they have enough energy, making sure that they actually feel fuller throughout the day and don't feel as hungry. They kind of feel like they're almost eating more often, even though they're probably eating very similarly, in terms of how often they're eating, but this just works for them. So you got to do what works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I am a snacker from way back. Like I will graze all day, but if you tell me, hey, we're having breakfast at 9, lunch at 1, and dinner at 6, I'll be like, okay, but I'm not hungry, so it's fine. I'll just wait. It'll be fine. But yeah, I mean, I love this idea of trying to don't change your eating habits. You know what I mean? If you're already trying to change what you're eating, don't change everything at the same time.
100%. If
Yeah,
we're going to change everything at once, we're going to fail. We're setting ourselves up to fail. So it's really important to make these smaller changes.
yeah. Okay. Do you think, in your opinion, do you think that having a healthy diet or having a healthy nutrition lifestyle is more expensive than having an unbalanced diet or an unbalanced lifestyle?
So this is really what we're all about here at Paramil. So, I'm going to say not at all, or really not necessarily at all. And there are so many ways that we can follow a healthy diet or a balanced diet, and keep it, within a normal budget. My biggest tip for people, biggest tip, because fresh produce is definitely the most expensive, is for really to people to buy or use frozen fruits and vegetables when they can. So frozen fruits and vegetables are great options because they really have just as many, if not actually more sometimes, more nutrients than fresh produce because they are picked and frozen at peak ripeness. So we've really got a ton of nutrients from there. So I'm not going to tell people if you want to start snacking with some like hummus, like a dip and vegetables, to use frozen vegetables because, it's probably not going to taste the same. You're going to lose some value in the taste more than really the nutrients. But if you're looking to use it for soups or stews or, smoothies, you're looking to roast vegetables quickly for dinner, stock up on frozen fruits and vegetables, and you will see tremendous changes, financially or in your budget, in your food budget. And this is such a small tip, but people say to me all the time, I just never knew this. I don't say the same thing about canned food. We should use canned food when canned vegetables, like when we can. But I'm not going to necessarily say that it's going to be the same in terms of nutrients because it won't. But that's not to say that we should never use canned vegetables. I also tell people, you guys spoke about Costco before, but certain things, let's say that your family goes through very, very quickly, or very often, buy in bulk. And I'm not saying have like a million cereals, and I live in an apartment, so I definitely don't want so much in bulk here. But things like rice, like brown rice, quinoa, nuts and seeds, if that's something you go through, oats, if that's something you go through, those type of things that are smaller, they're easier to kind of compact into smaller containers, and you go through them just so quickly. Those are things that are worth buying in bulk, because ultimately you're just going to save money by not constantly going out and buying these foods. And then the last thing I really tell people is to shop the sales. And I know some of us get really lazy and we have our grocery stores that we like to go to, and we really don't want to veer from that. But it's nice to sign up for, I've actually started signing up for different newsletters from different grocery stores. And you get the emails, and you kind of get, in the olden days, we used to have like circularies, which I think some supermarkets still have, but nowadays they're mostly, I think, sent to us through email, and we can see what the sales are. And a lot of the times they'll have sales on produce, and they'll have sales on proteins, and we should really just shop around a little bit more. And I know it's definitely more work, but if we get it to our email and we see, oh, at this store, it's like a 5-minute extra drive, but it's worth it because I'm going to save some money there. It's definitely good to know, and to just kind of sign up for all of those, all of our community or local grocery stores, so that we can, save as much money as we can.
I absolutely love that. And I cannot tell you how strongly I recommend the frozen fruit thing. I do that. I do frozen fruit in lieu of like ice cream after dinner. And I do the same thing. I go get like frozen fruit, like the stuff that's already chunked for smoothies and whatever. And then I'll just throw a bunch of the frozen fruit in a bowl. I'll put it in my microwave for like 15 seconds. And you basically have like fruit sorbet.
That sounds amazing.
It's not bad. I'm telling you. And like fruit salad, I love a fruit salad, y'all, but that stuff is expensive when you are just going to the store, getting everything, chopping it up yourself. And it does not last very long, at least if you're me, because melon is gross and I don't want it. So if you're not doing melon as a filler in your fruit salad, I'm telling you, go use the frozen stuff. You don't have to cut anything, so you're not going to cut yourself. And it's like a really, really, really easy like snack after dinner or whatever. It's lovely. So
that's great. Good tip.
Thanks. Okay, we did get a question in from Margaret early in on here. Margaret said, I'm keen to understand how to incorporate sufficient types of protein from alternative sources like legumes or beans, in addition to things like fish and chicken. So let's talk about satisfying our daily, protein requirement. What are some of the options that you recommend, especially if we're maybe keen to look away from animal sources?
So plant-based proteins are a very great option. They fall under that category of lean proteins. We can definitely make sure we're getting complete proteins. And when I say complete proteins, a complete protein is 8 grams of protein. So not every plant option has 8 grams of proteins. There are things that we can pair it with to make. So beans, for example, they're not a complete protein, but when you pair it with rice, you get a little bit of protein from the rice, and you get the majority of the protein from those beans. And you pair that together, and rice and beans, it's a great complete protein. Quinoa is a great protein. That is a complete protein. So there's so many plant-based options that we can include in our diet. And, it's good to just look around. Lentils are a great source of protein, also a great source of iron. So definitely there's so much that we can do when we talk about plant-based. And, it's good to look around and just see, what are these plant-based options that do contain, proteins, and how can we make them complete proteins if they're, not already.
I love this discussion because I think, one of the things that we talk about is, at least with Power to Fly, is this idea of, kind of like a healthy person, a healthy workforce, a healthy globe. And we know that, raising meat, the meat industry in of itself is not terribly green. And so there are a lot of people that are looking for, more environmentally friendly sources of protein. So I think that's wonderful to kind of talk about.
For sure. And also making your own, they do make, all these like plant protein, like burgers and, all those fake meats. For once in a while, I really believe they're okay. I don't know if there's a lot of fillers in them that I don't necessarily always love the ingredients, but even finding recipes to make your own is
Mhm.
so great and so easy. And that's something like going back to the meal prep conversation, we can really meal prep. We can stick those in the freezer. Those freeze beautifully, defrost beautifully, and easy to have for a meal.
Oh, heck yeah. My mom fed us casserole like a ridiculous amount of the time. And if there's one thing you know about a casserole is that it freezes beautifully. So that was always one of my go-tos. It's like, oh, it's winter. I feel like I can actually cook. Great. I'm going to make 8 casseroles. I hope you
Yes,
enjoy these. Like this is what we're having for the
exactly.
next months. Okay. So this person had written in asking, let's see. For those of us who live in big cities without cars, obviously you're limited with your neighborhood options. Are there any good or less expensive mail order places to buy groceries besides things like Misfits Market? Is this something that y'all explore at all within Fair Meal?
Yeah, so it's very difficult because, and I've really been trying. Again, I live in New York City, so I'm in like the ultimate big city here. Um, and these meal, like I don't even want to say meal delivery services, but these grocery delivery services, they get expensive because um they all have delivery fees. I guess my and I've tried to look into so many of them, and there's always like some sort of hidden fees that definitely just make things more expensive. um Sometimes you can sign up for you can sign up and become a member, and you get the free deliveries and things like that. And if that financially makes sense for you and falls in your budget, then I say go for that, because that definitely, like, if you're grocery shopping just constantly all the time, then that's something that just makes sense. But it's a very good question. I unfortunately don't have such a great answer for you, because I've been trying so hard myself to find just really affordable food delivery types of companies out there. But they really don't exist yet. And I say yet because I really believe that one day there will be. I think the Misfit produces the imperfect, what they have here, they have imperfect produce or something of that sort. I think those are great. People love them. They're not beautiful. The produce is definitely not beautiful, but that does not mean that it doesn't taste good or it doesn't have as many nutrients. They're just a bit bruised, and they just don't want to put them out in the stores. So really good question. I wish I had more of an answer for you, but unfortunately I don't.
No, and I think this is a good question, especially because of the answer, because it really does prove and kind of points to the fact that like this is not something that only one person is looking for, right? This is something that is a need that hopefully will be filled sooner rather than later.
Mhm.
I will tell you, if you have any sort of like a neighborhood Facebook group or anything like that, I love gardening. I also don't love eating vegetables. Like I said, there's just the two of us. So I will garden, and when I have way too much, I will post up on my neighborhood Facebook group of like, hey, there's a card table at the end of the driveway. I had a bunch of tomatoes today. Come get them if you want them. They'll be there till 6 or whatever.
Yes.
So like if you do have the ability to and want to share the wealth or share the greens a little bit, I definitely encourage it. It's a really nice way to get to know your neighbors. But yeah, like I completely agree. If this is also something that bothers you, start looking around, y'all. Somebody needs to fund that $1 million idea.
I agree. And
All
I'm
right,
happy to
so
support you.
yeah, right. Let us know if you do, please. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about sugar. Sugar also gets a really bad rap, same long lines of fat, I would say, within these conversations. So let's talk a little bit about what people should know about sugar. Obviously, yeah, aspartame has been coming out in the news really,
Mhm.
pretty heavily lately around carcinogens, I think, or
Yes.
cancer-causing agents.
Yeah.
What do you recommend that how do you recommend people think of sugar when they're thinking of adding necessary sugars into their diet and cutting unnecessary sugars?
Yeah. So this is something I've like just been for years speaking about. So this new aspartame thing, I'm sure a lot of people have seen in the news and in the media, how aspartame last week, the WHO came out saying that it's a carcinogenic. It's deemed carcinogenic, and this is something that we have known this for years, especially in the nutrition space. So this is not new, and this is kind of what I tell people, and I've always told people: we should not be drinking, diet soda or a 0-calorie soda or iced tea as our main beverage. Totally fine. Once in a while you want to have it. There are a lot of other things that I really don't like to say this as a dietitian, but there are a lot of other things that we're consuming that are, can potentially be carcinogenic, such as even barbecuing food, right? Like a burnt hot dog, which people love, or a burnt something, steak, something well done. But that can also be carcinogenic. So I'm not going to say throw it all out. And if that's something once in a while you want that can of Diet Coke, that's it. You're done. I don't want to tell people to do that because, again, this is something that we in the nutrition space have been saying for so long. And the WHO coming out with that is great. And we want them to come out with that just so that, the general public is aware. But I'm not going to say don't have it. What I usually tell people is that if you are somebody who has diabetes and, every so often you want to have a diet soda, that is what you should have. If you're somebody who does not have diabetes and, water, seltzer, unsweetened iced teas, things like that, those should be your beverages of choice, generally. And if you want to have a soda, I would have the regular soda because the regular sugar, yes, there are calories, but it seems like these aspartame, the aspartame sweeteners and all the chemicals that are in those other things could potentially be more harmful than just having a few extra calories in our drink, in our beverages. So I usually tell people go for the real stuff. Some people generally don't like the taste of, regular soda or regular iced tea. And I understand that. So again, I wouldn't have it often at all, but I'm not going to tell people you're going to a restaurant and you're having, and you want to get a diet soda, don't have it because something really bad's going to happen. I don't think once in a while that's going, it's going to kill you. But I think that the WHO coming out with this statement last week definitely should make people be a little bit more cognizant about how much we are having and how often we're having it.
I think you made a really good point right away, which is that this should not be your main source of like, not nourishment, but like, hydration. If you get to a point where you're just like, oh my God, I'm so thirsty, you should be downing water and then maybe getting the pop to like, have a lovely sip on afterwards. But yeah, I do think that that's a really good point to highlight is that like, yeah, just because this thing is sippable doesn't mean it's meant to hydrate you, on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I get out of bed in the morning because of my morning cup of iced coffee, but it is not the first thing that hits my lips. So, very, very important distinction to remember there.
Yeah, exactly.
We had
by the way, you brought up coffee, so I wanted to actually bring that up. So I'm sorry. So same thing with coffee. I'm going to tell people if some people, I happen to not like any sort of sweetener in my coffee, but if you're someone that does and you have it every day, I would tell you to have sugar in your coffee. I would not even tell you, add the Splenda, add the, whatever it is, the stevia. I would tell you to have sugar in your coffee because most people want it every day and you should. But I would say, that little bit of sugar is definitely not doing anything.
I honestly got to have this conversation with my dad a couple of weeks ago for like the first time ever. And he was like, so I gave up sweet and low. And the next words out of my mouth were, oh my God, what did it take? Turns out it was his doctor. But yeah, like, it's just one of those things where it's like, bro, you have not like really a teaspoon of sugar is it's gonna set off your finely tuned like body, whatever you've got going on right now. Come on. Okay. Stephanie wrote in with a really good question while we were talking here. Stephanie wants to know, what are some ways that we can assess our own unique nutritional needs when meal prepping to supplement deficiencies or balance hormones when stressed? i.e., when should you nourish with more protein or more carbs or just more exercise and less of something else like sugar?
I want to read the question because it's a very long question and I want to make sure I'm answering it properly. Okay, I see it. So what are some ways to assess our unique nutritional needs when meal prepping is supplement? When should you nourish with more protein or more carbs or just extra? Okay, so I think that this question is probably suggesting, let's say for somebody who, is an avid, someone who's, very avid about working out or very avid about, in very intense physically active, right? Is that kind of what that question's asking, I think?
That's the good vibe I get, but please, Stephanie, write in if you've got a different take on it.
That's kind of what I'm picking up here. I would say, when we are somebody who is working out very, very intensely, we do want to make sure that we are prioritizing proteins and carbohydrates. Proteins and carbohydrates are going to be like our main energy source for our body. So, we don't have to overdo it. Most of us eat enough protein in the day anyway, and most of us are eating enough carbohydrates as well. It's more about focusing, again, on the right proteins and the right carbohydrates. We want to make sure that we're, prioritizing the lean proteins and the lean carbohydrates. I'm not entirely sure what the question is asking in terms of the balancing hormones. Oh, no, just anyone experiencing stress from work or the job search.
Heck yeah, Stephanie, that'll up your cortisol levels right away, trying to job seek and hunt for jobs and stuff. I'm right there with you.
So I think this kind of goes back to what I was saying about the chronic versus the acute stress. So I would say, like, again, it's not like the, 3 days of eating a certain way is going to change our hormone levels so much. I think just ultimately, if there's something that if we are experiencing this chronic stress, we ultimately want to just add in more of those, cortisol lowering foods. But I wouldn't say that, we have to just, oh, you're chronically stressed, don't ever have ice cream. I wouldn't say that you need to do that at all.
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense.
I hope that I'm answering this question.
I hope so. Stephanie, thank you for the question. It was excellent.
Yes.
All right. So let's talk about gut health. This is something that I've been learning a lot about more, at least personally. So what foods should we include in our daily intakes for our gut health? What foods should we incorporate or avoid to help reduce some sort of like stomach bloating? All right. So let's talk about gut health first.
Okay. So gut health is a very, very hot topic right now. So I've actually, and actually, Stephanie, because I see that you spoke about serotonin and cortisol. So actually, I actually learned this from a gastroenterologist recently, that 80% of our cortisol is found in our gut. So we have 20% in our brain, 80% is in our gut. So we want to make sure that we're eating proper foods to help nourish that gut microbiome. And that was a really, really interesting idea for me to kind of learn, because what we really want to focus on when we're talking about gut health is probiotics versus prebiotics. And both of them are going to be very important when we talk about gut health. So we want to include probiotic foods. So that's the first thing we'll talk about. So probiotics are these healthy bacteria that allow for our gut to remain healthy. So examples of probiotics include like yogurt, kefir, pickled or fermented vegetables, and of course supplements if we need them. And then prebiotics are the foods that the probiotics feed off of to stay healthy, right? To stay healthy in our gut. So we have the probiotics, which are the bacteria, these healthy bacteria, and the prebiotics are the food that the probiotics feed off of, right? Just like we need food to survive, the probiotics need food to survive, and those are those prebiotics. So, and we want to make sure that they stay plentiful in the gut. So these foods include onions, green or like not ripe bananas, flax seeds, chia seeds, cabbage, and of course supplements, again, if that's something that we need. And taking a prebiotic supplement can be very important also in keeping people regular, going to the bathroom, things of that sort. But prebiotics and probiotics, making sure we get enough of them can definitely be very, very important in also making sure that our cortisol levels are lower, and upping those serotonin levels. So Stephanie, back to your question, just making sure that kind of, I guess, ties into the gut health and the gut microbiome, making sure that we're getting enough of those foods.
Okay, very cool. All right. Jen wrote in. Jen wants to know, what do you suggest for someone who has an addiction to a food that's bad for them and hasn't been able to quit, especially if you're using it as a coping method for chronic stress? All right, y'all. I will fall on the sword on this one. We'll put my dad on the sword. That man loves Oreos in a way that is unnatural. So if Oreos are your coping thing, and that's, you're having a rough day and you go grab an Oreo, have you ever had to deal with this yourself? What have you done in the past to try and break out of like a food rut or an addiction to something that you know is really not going to be good for
The best thing that you can do is make these small changes, like we've spoken about, right? So we can say, okay, he needs to have, a package of Oreos every day. The first small change you can say is, all right, well, I'm going to have half a package of Oreos every day, right? Or, you're having a piece of cake. Let's make that piece of cake a little bit smaller for a week. And then, the next week, make smaller changes, and eventually swap out that food for something that's a little bit healthier. And if that's not, ultimately the healthiest option, then
you?
something a little bit healthier. But the whole idea is to make these small changes, very, very, very small changes at a time. We don't want to drastically say, oh, I can't eat Oreos anymore, so now let me go have melon instead. That is not going to satisfy that. But when we do make small changes, that our body it kind of tells our body and our brain to not crave it as much anymore. And so I definitely think that that's my number one advice for that.
I like that. That's a good one. Okay, so let's talk kind of when we're out in the real world, right? It's all well and good to talk about prepping snacks at home and we're going to meal plan and we're going to do all of these things. How can we help ourselves to make better nutritional choices when we are not at home? If we're at a restaurant or a social event, someplace where we can't control, what the food situation is going to be like.
It's a great question. There's always an option that's going to work. Even if you're going to a fast food chain, there's always an option that's going to work. And, I probably sound like a broken robot, right? But like a broken record right now, but really focusing, making sure our plates have, these complex carbohydrates, these lean proteins, and these healthy fats. And again, if that's going to be paired with something that's, fried or something not as healthy, that's fine. But prioritizing those and making sure that most of what we're eating are those lean proteins, healthy fats, complex carbohydrates, then that's usually my tip for people.
Excellent. Okay. All right, let's talk about supplements. Now we've talked about supplements in terms of, uh, uh, stuff for gut health, or we've talked about supplements in terms of like if you can't get something into your diet. Let's talk about workout supplements. How do you feel about this?
So I generally do. I'm definitely not an expert in this, but I generally don't really like workout supplements. And going back to the sugar and the aspartame and all the chemical, that conversation, a lot of times they have ingredients, they have chemicals that we don't even really know what they are. They're like just some of these additives to kind of add in there. And people are like, oh, great, I don't know what that is, but it's probably good for me if it's in this protein supplement. And a lot of the time it's not. So I generally tell people, especially if, like working out, right, and doing weight training and things of that sort, and bodybuilding is something that you're really, really focused on. There's ways to make, to boost protein using just regular ingredients, such as, putting peanut butter into our smoothies and adding more cheese or adding more yogurt. There's plenty of foods that we can do to boost protein without using these supplements. There are some supplements that are okay. I definitely recommend, speaking with an expert or a dietitian who really focuses on these things, because again, I'm no expert, but my general feeling or my gut feeling on them is that I'm not really a fan.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, it's you just see so much stuff goes into them and it's like, do you really need that 18th ingredient in there? Is it necessary? I have the same questions myself.
Yes.
Okay, so we have about 5 minutes left. Let's talk about creating healthy eating habits. Once we start kind of getting into this mind frame, it's really easy to go from I never think about what I'm eating to I think about literally every single thing that goes into my body before I put it in, during, and then after. What do you think are some ways that we can try and create healthier eating habits without the obsession?
So if we have that obsession, then that's usually that's a bad thing. That means that we need to make some sort of changes. So my advice, and I said this a few times, I guess, within this past hour, is that to really view it more as a lifestyle and not as a diet. We don't want to view this anything as a diet. It shouldn't be called a diet. It should be called a lifestyle. We also don't want to make these aggressive changes, because when we make aggressive changes, that's when we're focusing so much on it. When we make small changes that we feel comfortable with, we're generally not going to be obsessing over them. So making, small changes every week or every 2 weeks can allow us to be most successful in ultimately changing our eating and our lifestyle habits. We also don't want to restrict foods. If we're restricting foods, that's also going to cause this obsession. We want to just make sure that, these nutrient dense foods or these nutrient dense options are the foods that we're consuming mostly and are a part of our daily diet. But we can and we should indulge on foods, on our favorite foods every once in a while. And I think that that's probably like my biggest advice to people is when we restrict them, that's when we start obsessing. And when we have them once in a while, we shouldn't obsess over it, because eating something one time, every so often is not doing anything. That's not causing that number on the scale to change. And we shouldn't be obsessing over that. And if it's something that we are obsessing over to a degree that we feel is unhealthy, then you definitely should speak with a professional, like a registered dietitian or somebody to help ensure to you that that's, you're okay.
Okay, excellent. I very much appreciate that. And I think you're right. It does, when you're making those smaller changes over, a number of weeks or a number of months, it makes everything a lot less high pressure, right? Because if it doesn't work out this week and you forget, and let's say you're sticking by your meal plan for the first 3 out of 7 days, and then it just all goes to hell, it's okay. There's always there's another week. We can try it again.
Exactly.
Yeah, very, very important. Okay, less than 3 minutes left. If people only remember one thing from today's session, what do you want that one thing to be?
Probably to not stress. If we do feel we need to make changes, make those small changes, because otherwise we're really setting ourselves up for failure.
I like it. That's a good one. All right. So if people want to follow you, see what's going on with Fair Meal, tell me all the things. What should they know?
So you can follow us on social media, Fair Meals, FARE, or visit us at fairmeals.org. We have tons of recipes. We have a lot of other webinars that we've done in the past. They're all up there on past events. And they're really, really interesting, with some really interesting moderators as well. So you can just check out some of our content, some of the information that we've spoken about. And yeah, I would say those are the 2 main sources.
Very, very cool. All right, y'all, that is going to bring us to the end of time today. But I just want to say a huge thank you to Arielle. It has been wonderful to get to know you and to learn from you today. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us. It's been absolutely.
Thank you. It was so nice to meet everyone. Bye.
Thank you again to our audience members. Y'all have been fabulous. I was absolutely loving all of the participation that we had in the chat thread there. Absolutely loving how y'all are all learning from each other as well. Thank you so much. Your participation is what makes these events really special.
Great questions, everyone.
Yeah, really. And y'all took an hour out of your day to do something positive for yourself and your body. That is not easy. So pat yourselves on the back. Everybody deserves, if not a cookie, then at least a gold star. Yeah, truly, like, congratulate yourselves, y'all. These are not easy things to do. So really, really thank you. Again, thanks so much for spending time with Powerfly as well as Arielle. And we are so happy to see you today and cannot wait to see you again on another upcoming event. Have a nice day.